Today we remember Helga Marie Stern. Helga delighted in spending time with her small but loving family, daughter Debbie, granddaughters Lori and Allie, son David, his wife Michelle, and granddaughters Lila, Erin, and Julia. It truly made her happy to see her family succeed and grow. Born in Berlin in 1922, Helga grew up with her twin, Hannah-Laura, who she lost at a young age. They often wore matching clothes to school and simply loved being together. Though she never described her life as difficult or tragic, Helga had to endure some hard times, even as a young child. She was born half Jewish, and when she was only 11 years old, her father fled the country to protect both himself and his family from the SS as Hitler rose to power. Helga and her mother took on her father's business of coffee delivery, and they sold black market cigarettes outside of an army base in order to survive. She even had to switch schools at one point because she was half Jewish. A short while later, Helga met Fred, later her husband of 31 years, through mutual friends in Berlin. After the war, Fred took over a factory and began manufacturing and selling furniture. Helga worked as a secretary and was described as a fashionista. She would get dressed to the nines to go to work in the morning, and when both she and Fred came home at the end of the day, she would make him go into their apartment first and calm the dog down just so he wouldn't ruin her clothes. They lived a happy and quiet existence in Berlin for a few years. Helga would often talk of her friend Gitti, with whom she went ice skating and swimming. But in 1949 they decided to move to America, and the moment Fred could get tickets for a ship, neither hesitated. They settled in Chicago and decided to start a family there. Fred and Helga, both of whom were half Jewish and not raised in particularly Jewish homes, decided together that they would raise their children as Jews, just to spite Hitler. Helga devoted herself to her family. She was, until the end, a bit of an anxious worrier. Debbie and David remember her staying at home for the entire day when they were in school, just in case the school called and one of them was sick and she needed to rush to school to pick them up. Helga's parents moved to Chicago shortly after she and Fred, and both kids remember her taking frequent trips to visit them and later to care for them as their health deteriorated. Helga lost Fred in 1977 after 31 years of marriage. She went back to work shortly after he died and continued to work until well into her 70s. In both jobs that she kept for many years, she worked her way up in companies to eventually serve as a secretary to the president. She was incredibly organized and detail-oriented. Though she didn't have many hobbies, Helga was always an avid reader, quickly devouring both fiction and nonfiction books. She wasn't a big fan of TV sitcoms, but loved soap operas like The Guiding Light and All My Children. Above all else, she was passionate about politics and always knew what was going on in the world. She hated Richard Nixon, and as Debbie noted, Watergate was probably one of the happiest times of her life. Helga always used to tell Debbie and David, "You can't say you hate people. The only person you're allowed to hate is Hitler." Later amended to include Richard Nixon and even later George W. Bush. She was known for her somewhat superstitious nature. When David was young, she used to count the pits of cherries or olives both before and after he ate them to make sure that they were the same number both times. The kids weren't allowed to drink water after eating fruit, which neither of them have ever heard anyone else say, ever. She was nervous and superstitious, but she mostly wanted to keep her family safe. She wasn't physically affectionate during most of her life, yet she cared very deeply for her friends and family. She showed her love by worrying, by sending cards, ordering special Godiva chocolates on Valentine's Day, writing personal notes, even though they were really short and she had terrible handwriting, for any and all occasions. It was extremely touching to find that after all these years, though she never told any of her family about it, she kept a box with mementos from all of the grandchildren's births, Debbie and David's milestones while growing up, random pictures of major events in the family's lives, and letters and notes that family or close friends had written to her. It turns out that Helga was rather sentimental, but just kind of quiet about it. She loved being a part of her family's lives and was incredibly supportive of both her children and her grandchildren. The very end of Helga's life was difficult. Cancer caused her already small frame to shrink over the past few years. But, of course, she could be found even up until the very, very end with a glass of half vermouth, half ginger ale right by her side. And even after going through so many difficult things during her life, she never expressed any kind of resentment through all of it. Helga Marie Stern was a wonderful daughter, wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She was such an important part of the Stern and Harris families and will be greatly missed in the years to come. Though she won't be with us, we will remember her, and we will keep her memory and love in our hearts.